In Blind Man mode, I will be taking on one of RuneScape's most classic challenges, the Quest Cape. But while playing in almost complete darkness, I will be taking on this challenge with my good friend Sir BlindQuest. And surprisingly, that is actually his real name, as you can see on his driver license here. To be honest, I did find the name quite insensitive from his parents as well, but the name does fit very well for the challenge that we will be taking on together. Through the use of brand new drone technology, we will be able to follow while he stumbles through Gillinor, trying to complete tasks and missions that normally require the use of all 5 senses, in search of the prestigious and also very beautiful Quest Cape, or at least so he has been told. This is Blind Man Mode. Say hello to Mr. BlindQuest, who will be trying to, hey Mr. Blind, what are you doing? We are over here, who will be trying to obtain one of the most legendary items of old school RuneScape, the Quest Cape, without the use of one of the most important senses, his sight. While collecting our ingredients for the very first quest, the cook's assistant, I want to tell you why I am so excited and so intrigued to get into this adventure. Have you ever done the 15th Warcraft trip of the day and thought to yourself, I could probably do this with my eyes closed at this point? I have. After playing this game for over a decade, I want to put to the test how well I actually know the old school RuneScape world by trying to play while barely being able to see anything. I will be starting out with the free-to-play quests while also playing as a free-to-play account, with Dragon Slayer as the final goal before we move on to the world of members. I will be playing without plugins like the Quest Helper and as far as possible without a quest guide. But this is not an unguided account. If I am unsure of where to find an item or where to go to progress the quest, I will look it up on the wiki before starting the quest so that I might know that the shipyard is located on the western side of Karambia. But once I set off from the Grand Tree to go toward the shipyard, I will have to get there without any visual aids, which also includes any kind of map, like the minimap in the corner of my screen. When faced with some kind of in-game puzzle, I will also be trying to do it without a guide. For example, in Ernest the Chicken, when I flip a lever, I will have to go physically over to the gate, close enough to be able to see if it's open or not, and try and get back to the lever and flip it again. This ensures that I will always know what the objective is and where it's located. And the challenge lies in blindly stumbling to the location and dealing with any challenges found on the way, but I will not be stuck 20 hours stumbling through Falador searching tile for tile while looking for an NPC that is actually found in the desert. Which leads us to our very first quest completion, Cook's Assistant. And this is the point of view that I will be having while playing on this account. And as you can see, I won't be playing completely blind. If I get very close to an object, I will be able to tell what it is, which allows me to have something to somewhat guide me through the game. But to give you an idea of how difficult this account will actually be, I will show you this clip from when I went through Tutorial Island and actually got stuck for literal minutes walking between 2 of the buildings, until I luckily saw one of the big yellow flashing arrows. But those arrows are, unfortunately for me, only to help lost players on Tutorial Island. When I get into the real game, I won't have any flashing arrows to help me on the way. If I get lost, I will have no choice but to keep stumbling around while potentially being attacked by hostile NPCs until I hopefully find some kind of landmark to help me get back on track. The next quest that we will be doing is the Restless Ghost. I will be starting out with all the quests surrounding the Lumbridge area and slowly moving further and further away from my home base. I am very familiar with the Lumbridge area, so we will start out easy and slowly be moving into harder territory in which I'm not as familiar and we might run into some difficulties in getting around. Another aspect of the questing which will be very difficult on this account will be the fighting. In free to play, we will be fighting against a few bosses, with the main boss being Elvark, which we will be fighting against in the end of Dragon Slayer. Checking back in with BlindQuest, he happened to stumble into the Lumbridge church while trying to reach the pub for his morning pint. While still fantasizing about his morning pint, Father Eric started complaining about some ghost in his graveyard. BlindQuest had a hard time paying attention, and he found himself just nodding and smiling and waiting for Father Eric to finish. And before BlindQuest even realized what had happened, he had agreed to sort out the whole ghost thing for Father Eric. Why Father Eric figured that the man mistaking the church for the pub would be his best option for the job, I could not tell you. So instead of sitting in his favorite chair with a nice pint in his hand, Sir BlindQuest suddenly found himself with mud to his knees deep in the swamp while some weird old man was harassing him. Father Eric had told him, once you see the Western Sea, you just turn north and you will be at the cabin very shortly, which would have been great if it wasn't for the fact that Mr. BlindQuest was blind as a bat. But after a few hours of walking, he smelled the delightful smell of smoke coming out of a chimney. And feeling his way around what seemed to be a wall, he finally managed to find the door. And upon entering, Mr. BlindQuest did the only sensible thing. He went directly to the dinner table and stole a pair of gloves and putting them on his hands instantly. After talking to the priest for what felt like hours, he finally got the amulet which would help him with the ghost. So sitting down on the carpet, Mr. BlindQuest used the only spell that his parents had taught him, the home teleport, which allowed him to always make his way home if he ever got lost somewhere. Finally being back on familiar ground, BlindQuest went to look for the damn ghost. Father Eric had told him that the chapel would be located right next to the church, which would have been fine for any seeing man, but he forgot to mention the graveyard between the church and the chapel where BlindQuest managed to get lost. After a while, with his patience already running out, he finally found the door to the chapel. He opened what he assumed to be the casket and found the ghost, relieved that now this quest would finally have an end. But no, the ghost wouldn't go away so easy. The ghost claimed that he needed BlindQuest to return his head. And something that seems to already be a recurring theme, the ghost told him that he just needed to look for a huge tower southwest of here. Which again would have been excellent if BlindQuest had the ability to see such a tower. But all he could do was start going southwest and hope for the best. Luckily for BlindQuest, his grandparents lived in Draenor village growing up, so he was somewhat familiar with the trick. And finally reaching what he guessed to be the outside wall of the tower, he only had to make his way to the basement, where the ghost had told him that the head would probably be found. And after stumbling around in the unknown tower for a while, he finally stomped his knee against something that he guessed had to be a ladder. And he suddenly found himself in a humid basement in complete darkness. Tracing the slimy wall with his hand, he felt something made of wood that he guessed to be a door. With his other senses sharpened by the excitement of finally being done with this damned ghost, he made his way to the altar. Searching the altar, his hands locked around what seemed to be a skull. But before he had time to bring it to his face to take a closer look, he heard the distinct sound of bone moving against bone. And not sticking around to try and figure out what had made that sound, he made his way back to where he came from. Back in Lumbridge, Mr. BlindQuest made it back to the chapel for what he hoped would be the last thing that the ghost would ask for. If he could wrap this up soon, he would be able to make it back to the pub with plenty of time before closing. And here we are back in the darkness in the perspective of Mr. BlindQuest, finishing up the restless ghost. With the skull brought back to its rightful owner, the ghost can finally get some rest and stop haunting the graveyard of Father Eric in the Lumbridge Church. So let's enjoy this animation of something green moving through the darkness. And with our second quest completion giving us over 1000 prayer XP, we are now level 9 prayer on the Mr. BlindQuest account. And prayer is definitely a skill that I will be talking a lot more about in future episodes, as a high prayer level will be one of the strongest weapons that we have for traversing some of the very difficult quest locations that can be found in this game, full of dangerous monsters. After leaving the crypt, BlindQuest decided to finally head towards the pub. And while passing the church, he made sure to cross the road and make a wide berth around the church to make sure not to get dragged into another situation once again. When smelling the delicious odor of Asgardian ale from the bar, BlindQuest expertly maneuvered all the way around the bar to enter through the back door, which he knew from experience gave him the biggest chance of not being dragged into any unwelcome conversation. After getting a pint, BlindQuest went into a corner of the bar, and this is where things really started to get weird. BlindQuest have always claimed that he met a hooded figure that told him about a hidden treasure and gave him some kind of a scroll with the first clue to finding it. But many eyewitnesses that were in the bar that day claimed that BlindQuest was standing in the corner mumbling to himself, and they never saw any hooded figure. But the fact is that shortly thereafter, BlindQuest was seen with what appears to be a hidden treasure. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's continue following BlindQuest and see where this adventure takes him. Sir BlindQuest opened up the scroll and it read the following. Within the town of Lumbridge lives a man named Bob. He walks out of his door and takes 1 step east, 7 steps north, 5 steps west, and 1 step south. Once he arrives, he digs a hole and buries his treasure. After finishing reading the scroll, without even finishing his beer, BlindQuest rushes to the general store to buy a spade. With only 6 gold to his name, his heart starts beating very fast. This might finally be his opportunity to get rich. Rushing to find Bob's axe store, he enters houses at random, but finally in the end he does end up in the right house. Standing in front of the door, he reads the scroll again, thinking to himself, which direction is north? On the first try, he accidentally faced east and ended up walking into a gravestone before even finishing the first step. On his second try, he did find north, but while looking at his scroll, he accidentally walked into a woman who got very angry and started hitting him. But as they say, third time's the charm, and on the third attempt, he actually did manage to get all the way to where the scroll was pointing him. And digging at the correct spot, he found another scroll. After looking at the new scroll for only a few seconds, BlindQuest knew exactly where to dig, having spent his entire life walking around the Lumbridge castle. And after digging, he found a weird, mysterious orb. He quickly figured out that the closer to the correct position that he is, the warmer to the touch the orb would be. And he realized that he needed to be heading west. By taking a few steps and touching the orb again, he soon found himself in Draenor. And for what he lacked in vision, he most definitely made up for in enthusiasm, as he soon had digged up almost the entire Draenor village. But in the end, by sheer brute force, he did manage to find the next clue. Sir BlindQuest could feel that he was very close to the treasure, and after looking at the new scroll for only a few seconds, he realized that the pig pen would be the perfect place to hide the casket, as no one would ever look in there. And without any issues, he made it to the pig pen and found the casket. With the casket now in his hands, BlindQuest knew that the only thing that he had to do was get to Port Rim, and he would be a very rich man. He started imagining all the kinds of riches that would be in the casket that Veos surely would share with him. And that marks our third quest done. X marks the spot. 200 gold and an antique lamp is the reward, which isn't too bad. 200 gold can get me a long way in free to play, and the antique lamp will probably be going into prayer, as I do want to unlock overheads as soon as possible. So while Mr. BlindQuest is surely spending all of the newly earned money on beer, let's talk a little bit about this series. Today we completed our first 3 quests on the free-to-play journey towards defeating Elwok in Dragonslayer. The going wasn't that hard today, as we were primarily walking around the Lumbridge area, which is a part of the map that I know very well. But I can promise you that from here on out it will only be harder with each passing episode. So let me leave you with this one final thought. Imagine completing the Morning's End Part 2 final puzzle without the use of any guides or any plugins, while barely being able to see a single tile in front of you.